Afternoon, folks. Doing a little bit of fault resolution on Vlad the Disco. For those that don't know him, it's Vlad the Inhaler because he's a 3.9 V8, currently only on petrol, so he inhales it. The only vehicle in Christendom with a water-cooled fuel gauge. Anyway, one of the challenges we've got is that the passenger seat electric seat controls have stopped working in one or other of the combinations. So I've just fixed the driver's seat because I had the same problem. I'm going to record fixing the passenger seat one now so that you guys can learn from it and tackle it on your own. It's a little bit fiddly, but it's not difficult. So this is the controls. I guess if you're watching this, you recognise that. Idiot. You can see that it works in some directions, so the back will come up and down, but the seat base control will only work forward and back. What it won't do is elevate or twist. So there's two little switches in there that tend to get carbonised up. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take that apart and I'll show you the process. Right, first job is to get the controls out. It's fairly straightforward, it's just plastic clips that are holding it in. If you get a lever in, typically behind the top is easiest. You can get it started to come out towards it and then just pull out like that. And then you've got two plugs to pull off. They're a bit stiff usually, but they don't have any retaining clips or anything like the ones on the engine bay wire and loom, etc. So there you go, pull them off. I tend to try and get some slack so they don't disappear too far back inside. So there we go, that's the control unit out. Right, we've moved inside now because it's pretty freezing outside for a start. But this is a job that definitely needs a work surface. I'm using my dining table. If you've got a work surface in your garage, then obviously you can do that. You don't need much in the way of tools. Got a head torch because it's a wee bit dark in here, and when you're looking at black against black it can be a bit difficult, so you'll probably see that lighting up the scene now and again. You'll need a crosshead screwdriver of some description, not particularly big. There's a couple of small screws in the side and then a reasonable size one in the end, in the middle, and this kind of thing works for me so far today. I've got a couple of flat heads just to use as levers, and they're all magnetic, and that's kind of important because inside that it's a pile of springs, brass levers, ball bearings and switch bodies all flying in close formation, and when you start taking it apart obviously there's a risk of it going ptoing, so you do have to be a little bit careful, and the magnetics help you pick things up, put things down, etc., because fat fingers. I think there's enough said on that. So let's get started. This is definitely a glasses off job as well. This the lid of this screwdriver set is really useful because that's where we're putting most of my gubbins once I've got it open. Right, so what you can see here is the central screw. You don't need to touch that for now, but there's one there. I don't know if that's in focus, and there's one there. So let's get them out. No, first thing we're going to do is take the switches themselves off. So these are just pressure fit, so with a bit of gentle levering. On this one I'm exerting pressure up with my fingers as well as the screwdriver, and you're levering round a central pin. So there we go. Now you can see there's a slot running left and right for these two parts of the switch, and then a central slot for that central one there. Right, this nickel one here, same challenge. This time it's fixed there, so you're trying to lever at that end. Come on, come on, there we go. Okay, and that's the connector for in there, and then that space there is where that switch lever goes. It's quite important to take that into account because you've got to make sure you get them all back in the same place when you put it back together again. So with that done, we can now take these screws out. There's one. And there's the other. Right. Again, you don't need to worry about that for now, because those two screws, once we just pop the body off at each end, oh, there we go, and then that's the fascia out of the way. Okay, we're left with this. Next thing, it's time for the big screw. Now I'm probably on the edge using this little screwdriver because it's quite a big head, and if you're not careful you can tear the centre of the Phillips screw apart. So you might want to use a bigger screwdriver for that bit. Right, the only thing holding these two parts together now are these little self-engaging catches all round. Okay, now the top part is under a wee bit of spring pressure, so when you eventually get to a point where enough of these are undone, it'll want to spring apart. So just be aware of that and try and control it so that you don't end up picking ball bearings off the carpet, or worse, out of the filings and things on the garage floor. If your garage was anything like mine used to be, then there'll be dead leaves and grinding, dust and filings and all sorts. And you can hear some of them pop, which is a really positive sign. There we go, and you can see the body starting to lift up, so I'm just going to put a wee bit of pressure on there now. And this end, where you've got these curves, this one in particular, you'll notice that one's got a bit of a L-shaped bracket on it. This one's got a round piece there. So this end tends to be more difficult. So you've got a little locating piece there, and then this pin, and then this one round the side, and it's a case of getting them all disengaged and just fiddling back and forward. And you might be able to hear some rattling starting to happen. That's because it's the body's starting to separate. The ball bearings are all starting to fall off their positions. Okay, so that's it separated. So I'm going to lift it carefully, and you should see inside the various springs, ball bearings, etc. that I'm talking about. One tip would be to try and remember orientations of everything here, okay? And if you're taking things off, putting them in the right places. It's actually looking quite clean, but obviously if it's, talk of the devil, there was a ball bearing stuck there, and happily it's landed in my little space there. But obviously if you've got stuff in there gumming up the works, you want to get rid of that. But mine's is fine so far. Now you can see in here, a lot of the ball bearings have fallen down, but some of them are still in place. You can see that for each switch, so that's one of the switches there that slides left and right. We're doing it very carefully because everything's very loose. There we go. There's a ball bearing on top of a spring, and at the other end of that spring is another ball bearing that's pushing down on the switch lever. Okay, so it's just a case of lifting them all out. You don't have to take the springs out of the bodies, but chances are they're going to fall out anyway. No, look at that, that's convenient. Okay, so the way I lay them out, and this is purely me, is I try and lay them out in the same orientation they are in this. And there's the bottom two ball bearings from that switch. So let's get rid of them. Here we go. Let's get rid of the loose ones as well. Where are they all? There's another one. And the ones that are still in place. Good. Now, let's put these two over here because they were the bottom ones. But what you should end up with is 8 ball bearings off of the top of the springs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Perfect. Okay. These two are the bottom. So that's that switch there that we fitted in here. So if I lift this one up, would you look at that? Everything's come with it, including the ball bearings. I don't know if you can see that. So that one sits there. And these are the little switch blades, and these are what we're going to clean up. We'll show you that in a second. And then we've got this one here. How's this going to work? It's leaving the ball bearings behind. One of the springs has dropped out. There we go. We'll just do that. The ball bearings and the springs are all the same, so there's no real worry about putting the right one back in with the right switch. So you don't have to worry too much about that. Now, this one is a bit different. The pivot bar that runs left to right is held in by a couple of brass sort of shark tooth blades, if you like, into these plastic housings. But you can lever them out carefully. And the way I tend to do it is one end first. So try to keep my thumb out of the way, but at the same time not lose it. So wish me luck. There we go. That's out far enough. And if I can just pick it up, there we go. You can see it's really just a little U bracket. Okay. And then you can pull the pivot bar out from the other end. Things falling out of it. And that goes there. So there's one of the springs for it. And then there's the two bottom ball bearings. Now we should have 8 of those as well, but remember 2 of them stuck to this one. So let's just there we go. Get the springs out of the way. And then again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Perfect. Okay. So obviously these blades being brass, they're not magnetic, so you do have to pick them up manually. And if we start examining it, that one doesn't look too bad. Belongs to that switch. Again, these blades all appear to be the same, but I'm just being a bit more careful and keeping them together with their switch. Come on. There we go. Now, if I remember rightly, I've had this one out before and cleaned it up. So this is the second round. But obviously in a vehicle that's 30, what is it, 2 years old now, sometimes a one-time fix isn't the solution. Oh, wrong place. That belongs with that switch. Come on. These are very lightweight, these little leaves, so they can be a little bit fiddly to work with. last one. Ah! Fat fingers. There we go. Right, so there's two cleanups we're going to do. We're going to clean up the contact points in here, and then we're going to clean up the corresponding contact points on the blades. And at first glance, these all look pretty good. So it was the back and forward of the seat that was the challenge. So that would be this switch, and you can see just here on this one there looks to be a little bit of carbon on that contact. So I'll just give it a bit of a clean up. I do have a little bit of sandpaper to hand, but to be honest with you, what I don't want to do is take too much material off the contacts. So I tend not to use that if I can get away with it. So it's just a case of examining the contacts, and where there's any kind of carbonisation or corrosion of the contacts, cleaning them up. Now obviously you can tap these out to check both mechanical and electrical effectiveness once you've done all the cleanup. It can be a little bit fiddly, so the best thing I've found is to put it all back together again and use the pinouts on the other side of this bracket as your test points, because you need the spring pressure holding the ball bearings and down onto the spring leaves so that when the switch operates the contacts are made correctly. I tried doing it previously with it open like this, and it just doesn't work. You've no confidence you're making the right moves. So that's them all checked. Maybe a wee bit. Yeah, they all look okay. So let's move on to the leaves one by one, and I think I'll tackle the ones for the central switch first, because I think that's the one that was messing me around. It looks okay. Well, that one does anyway. So as you can see, these leaves live in those little plastic kind of square bracket positions. And again, they look good. This is interesting. Of course, there's no guarantee the switch is the problem. It could, of course, be that there's something wrong with power getting to the motor, whether it's the motor burnt out or whether it's some kind of short on the cabling or some kind of fuse going. But in this age of vehicle, this tends to be the prevalent problem. And of course, spares now are getting really few and far between for this kind of more exotic thing. That's looking a bit, needs a bit of attention there. So making what you've got last is useful. And certainly when I started having these problems in the past, I was reading all sorts of posts about how difficult it is and oh, it's complicated, no, you'll never fix it. And do you know what? A wee bit of patience and a wee bit of delicacy and you're laughing. Ah, balls, that's what I need to do. I need to get that other blade out. There we go. You could, of course, try and hook it in, but there's so many things you try to hold in place that it gets messy. So taking it out so you can just drop the bar in and then put those U-shaped holders back in is the better way of doing it. Alright, this pair, let's have a look. Yeah, that's fine. There we go. Let's have a look. Yeah, it's fine. That one goes in there. You can of course take some photographs before you start taking things apart. And obviously you've got this as a reference point now as well. But the other tip is that the brackets, see these little square silver things with the divot in them? That's where the leaves live. Come on. That one might need a little bit of TLC. It really is as simple as this, guys. There's no real rocket science to it. You know, if you've built an Airfix model in your life, you can probably do this. Right, that's them all back in place. So now we need to start putting in the ball bearings. Now what it's 6.5 dozen to be honest with you, but what I've tended to do is just do one switch at a time. So that's the bottom ball bearings in. I'll take this switch now, pop out that other spring just because it's a bit easy to see what's going on. Now remember that this central switch has these on either side, and because I've put them in the orientation, I know which side the switch actuator sits on. It's important that you do that. The only other tip is now that if you look down through there, I don't know if the lens can catch that, you can look straight through it, and that way you can line the bar up in the middle, because you've got to get the ends, one end on there, one end on there, and capture the ball bearings at the same time. There we go, that's that one in. And now I can put the springs in. And this is where the delicacy comes in, because everything's loose, there's nothing holding anything down properly. So you have to be a wee bit delicate with it, or you'll end up chasing your tail. You'll finish putting one together, you'll be putting another one together, and you'll knock it all apart. Knock the work you've done already apart. Yeah, let's do this one. Should probably have done this one first, but never mind. Ball bearings. Yeah, see what I mean? Okay. Now I can look at locating the bar in the right place. I've just realised something. I need to do the central one first, because it's partially blocked by the switch on the left. So, where were we? Yeah, let's knock that spring out again. So there we go. Ball bearings are captured. Pivot bars in the right place. Now we've got to replace these kind of carefully. There we go, there's one. Obviously the more often you do this, particularly with these brackets, the less grip they've got. And then just give them a last push home. There we go. Right, there we go. I can put this one back in. There we go. Out of interest, I've found it quite useful to put the blade of the magnetic screwdriver between the coils of the spring, because it gives you a bit more leverage to remove the screwdriver once the spring's in place without it trying to follow it. It really is just a case of taking your time, being delicate, and watching where your fat fingers and tools are going, so that you don't end up destroying the work you've just done. Ball bearings first, sorry. Perfect. Ball bearings captured and pivot bar in the right place. Couple of springs. The other thing is the springs are symmetrical, so it doesn't matter which way up you put them. There we go. And then the last two ball bearings onto their positions here. Oh, I've destroyed a leaf. There we go. Oh, good, made it. Hope you don't mind me wittering to myself here sometimes, because sometimes it's easier to talk to yourself when you... God, this. There we go. Now, which way did that go? Give you a tip. You can put it in place and then compare it with this. Yeah, it's in the right orientation. Springs. Nearly there now. There we go. Right, this is perhaps the fiddliest bit, because you've got to sit a ball bearing on top of each of the springs, which means working around the various other switches and the sort of actuating levers. Yeah. And when you get fat fingers, it doesn't really help. So this is where the magnetic screwdriver is both a boon and a curse. There we go. Come on. Come on. Let go. There we go. Alright, I'm going to turn this round now a little bit because it's easier getting your fingers in like that. So just be careful when you're doing this that it's inevitable the switch bodies will move, but just try and be very careful and limit all of that stuff. Right, there we go. That is your switch ready to be reassembled, and it's simply a case of lining up the switch actuators. And I find doing these bottom three first is the easiest way, and then getting this top one in. Now what surprised me a little bit with this is that I found I had to lever things back in a little bit. Come on. There you go. Just make sure it's all home, because that tension is pushing down on the ball bearings on the inside, which is pushing down on the springs, which is pushing down on the ball bearings at the other end to ensure all the contacts work properly. And then just a wee function test. That one doesn't feel like it wants to go in the right direction. I'm going to have to take this apart. If I do, I might do that off camera. The point is, you've seen the methodology. As I say, if you're concerned about the electrical side of it, you can use a meter and tap out these. Tip of the week is these three bigger contacts are the ones that I guess send power to the motors, and then each of these pins is just a, I don't know whether it's an earth or a positive, but when the switch moves, that pin connects to the big one, or that pin connects to the big one, or that pin connects to the big one, or that one, and so on. So when you're tapping it out, initially I was looking for a closed circuit between these two smaller pins on this switch, and it took a bit of fiddling around to figure out that actually when I move the switch one way, and this one and the big one are connected. So I'm using my fat fingers, I should use something sensible. When this one and the big pin is on the meter, and I move the switch in one direction, it'll sound off. And when I connect these two and move it in the opposite direction, then it'll sound off, and so on. So you can check the electrical functionality of this before you finish putting it back together again and put it back in the car. So, as it says in the best Haynes manuals, the rest of it is a reverse. The rest of the assembly is the reverse of disassembly. So I'm going to end this point here, and hopefully I'll have success when I check those other switches that don't appear to be mechanically working. They should be moving further this way, and they're not for some reason, so I need to figure out what's going on there, and that might actually be the root of the problem in this case. Anyway, I hope this has been useful, and I think what I'd say is don't be scared to have a go at these switches, because they are really like rocking horse poo these days for a Discovery one. Right guys, I think I figured the problem out. So these two switches either side that weren't moving properly, I believe I've managed to put them on the wrong side. I don't know if any of you spotted that, but you'll notice that there's a shoulder on the switch this side, and if I slide that switch, it prevents the switch from moving far enough for those blades to contact. So I think what I've managed to do is get this one living on this side when it actually belongs on that side, and vice versa. So time to fix that, and I'll put it back together again and show you that it worked. Okay guys, as you can see now it's moving in both directions, so mechanically I've fixed that problem, so just be aware of that one, keep an eye out for it. Everything else is working as expected, so mechanically we're sound, hopefully electrically we're sound. I guess we'll find out when I put it back together again on the car. Anyway, I hope this has been useful.